makes it easy to stay connected. We'd love to continue the conversation.
Excellent. I'm going to turn off my camera because I'm having a little video lag here. But thanks, Darren, for that great presentation. We already have several great questions from our audience. But I want to let you know, audience, that there's still time to submit questions. Just use that Q&A tab. So, guys, are you ready for some questions?
That's good. Thank you.
All right. First one, you mentioned the hardware that Quilter runs on. Does that mean that it runs on your servers rather than locally?
Yeah, so generally, Quilter requires basically a small cluster to run. We host a version of it on AWS, and so some customers choose to come to us and upload to our site, and then it runs on the AWS servers. For customers that are more IP sensitive, like aerospace companies and whatnot, we do on-premise deployments where it ends up running on your hardware. But to be very clear, it's not like something you can run on a laptop or a local desktop. You do need some kind of cluster.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. What classes of boards can Quilter reliably handle today? And what's the near-term roadmap for more complex designs?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In general, we do well today with the kind of board that Darren showed in the presentation, right? So we tend to see these, test boards where people are comparing a bunch of chips for, say, an aerospace application or automotive application. Maybe they're doing categorization or just doing a first firmware build. These kinds of boards take typically a week or two for a human to design and don't have a lot of density constraints or super high speed or analog constraints. We're definitely reaching into some more complex designs. We'll soon share a design we're working on that is more focused on single board computer type of complexity. But we'll explain more of that kind of in the coming weeks.
Excellent. Do you have any plans to work with the Fusion 360 Eagle ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a good question. We had Eagle support early on in Quilter, but chose to take it out just because we didn't see kind of serious commercial demand for that. But if there is serious commercial demand, then we can kind of dust that off.
Yeah, that's more of a maker hobbyist tends to think, I think.
Yeah.
Next question. In the physical validation, how does Quilter model EM interference, and what type of validation do you run for that LT spice, that type of thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in general, we focus on board level characterization. We're not actually modeling circuits. That typically takes things like spice out. We think of the EM interference questions in kind of three categories of accuracy. The first would be to do what most humans really do today, which are things like the 3 widths rule, right? Kind of geometric approximations to how to avoid interference. What we're working on next is quasi-static approximations. So we want to be able to give you back parasitic capacitance and inductance, but that's not quite ready yet. And then we have a full wave solver that we've used in the past, but found it to be too slow to really generate a lot of boards quickly. And so that'll be reserved only for the most extreme cases.
Got it. Okay. So what does this mean for PCB designers? Does Quilter replace them, or does it change what they do? Like, does their role sort of change in this sort of environment?
Yeah, in the short term, we've certainly never heard of anyone considering replacing their PCB designers. I think that's a far future. But what we hear very frequently is that there's not enough PCB designers, and that companies want their PCB designers working on the cutting edge, difficult, 26-layer intense jobs, right? And so Quilter's typically brought in to kind of take care of the easy boards so that the designers can really focus on the hard stuff, on the creative stuff. That's really where it plays today.
Next question. The board that you showed in the demo, what's the typical performance and time of the jobs, those type of things?
Yeah, the time is improving drastically, day by day. We work on that quite a bit. As of today, the board that Darren showed would produce a result in a couple of hours, and it would keep running to explore the kind of full solution space in maybe 5 or 6 hours. But you'll get a good result in a couple hours on that board.
Okay. It's more of a kind of AI type of question. The system ever train on the layouts?
Yeah, generally the answer is no. The way that we approach this is that not that we are mimicking what humans do in the layout, we're trying to train from the physics signal itself. So our problem is really to generate a bunch of layouts from first principles, grade them with these simulations, and then retrain based on how well or not well we did. In the free version of the site, we will take boards that are submitted and kind of use them to seed these generations, right? Kind of think of them as chess puzzles that you're giving to us. But of course, in the customer versions and the enterprise versions, absolutely not.
Okay. This next question from Zachary. Thank you, Zachary. This is getting more on the development side, but Quilter is following the physics evaluation and such. Will Quilter ever be able to also help test, in other words, run simulations of PCB designs?
If I understand the question, it's getting at we are working on physics evaluations on the PCBs for sure, right? We're trying to guarantee that the PCB will work. We eventually would like to get to the point where we can simulate more of the design end to end, right? So including what the schematic is actually doing in a kind of spice type world with the parasitics we're getting from the actual PCB design. So that would be getting closer to a full PCB simulation. That's not on our near-term roadmap though. And then as far as whether we get into any physical test, that's not something we're considering seriously at the moment.
Okay. Next question. Can Quilter make a production grade board for small boards, like things that 100 components or 400 pins, that type of tiny boards?
Yeah, we certainly can create layouts for boards that have 100 components, 400 pins. That's kind of bread and butter, and that's probably the median kind of complexity board that we get on our site. But whether it's production grade for 1 million runs, at this point, I would say no, right?
Okay.
I'd be very comfortable making 10 prototypes, 100 prototypes, 1,000 prototypes even, but like getting really great yield on 1 million production run is still better left for humans.
Yeah, they'll look at different parameters and that type of thing, aren't they? Yeah.
Exactly.
Next question. How long does it take to get up and running with Quilter? Is there a lot of heavy onboarding?
Yeah, it's a great question. Generally, it's really easy. So most people, from the time they first sign in to the time that they have a board running, it takes them a few minutes. It takes a bit more time to kind of learn how to get the best out of Quilter, though, right? So we provide lots of training to the enterprises we work with for how to set it up and how to kind of make sure it succeeds. But just getting a quick idea of what it'll do, especially on a simple board, typically is a few minutes for most people.
Okay. Next question. You mentioned that Quilter generates multiple layout candidates in parallel. Can you explain how teams typically use that? Is it more about speed or optimization, or is it a combination of both?
Yeah, there's a few different things that teams focus in on when they're exploring the design space. So one thing you might do is explore how big your board might have to be. Mm-hmm. So some designers will take a board that's big, make it smaller, submit all 4 or 5 designs to Quilter, and just see which one completes, right? And that way they're kind of figuring out how small they can make the design. Another option is to trade stack ups, right? So you can decide whether it's important to go 4 layer, 6 layer, 8 layer on this board and trade the kind of cost versus performance metrics on that design. Those are really some of the ways that people use multiple answers from Quilter.
Okay. But I think we have one more question before I just want to comment that Darren's presentation resonated for me in a couple of ways. It kind of shows my age. When I was first a co-op student in engineering, literally they were doing tape outs with tape. Well, I was doing that. The senior designer was using the first PCB, PC 286 computer PCB layout, so, and also like in high school, I was actually using punch cards in my freshman year in computer class. And by the time I got to senior year, they're using like terminals, so it just kind of shows that comes out, but I'm an old man, of course, but
sorry to jump in, when my grandfather died, he was actually a university professor in math, and we found his stack of formulas in the garage. And at the time, we're like, these are junk. We threw them away. And in hindsight, probably would have been useful for a museum somewhere.
Yeah. Like slide rules, things like that. That's so funny. Yeah. Okay. Well, some questions. Well, we killed some time and some other questions came in, which is awesome. Jacob asks, thank you, Jacob. How does Quilter handle high current traces? Does the designer have to set the trace width?
Yeah, Jacob, thank you for the question. There's a few different ways to do this. So first things first, when you go through the process of submitting boards to Quilter, you can use net classes or just net names to identify which nets have high current. You'll tell us what the current is, 2 amps, 3 amps. If you like, you can leave the width calculation to us, and we'll scale appropriately for the size, the thickness of the copper on each layer, and so on and so forth. You can set it manually yourself if you really want to control the exact number rather than leaving it to us. You can also create polygons instead of thick traces, right? So you can actually ask Quilter to make the largest polygons you can manage for those nets rather than just a minimum width trace, basically.
Okay. Next question. Do you have a plan for making some type of extensions that can be included in CAD software?
No concrete plans at the moment. We've considered extensions here and there, but at the end of the day, most of the CAD companies that we work with support us in just directly reading and writing their files. So rather than downloading and installing an extension and kind of learning how to use it, just take your file, and instead of emailing it to a fellow person, an intern or a PCB designer, you just drop it into a site. And there's kind of no installation process, nothing to learn, no buttons. And then we go through the Quilter onboarding process in Quilter itself. The direct answer is no, not at the moment.
Okay. Okay, our last question. You said Quilter finishes whatever isn't there, but can engineers still intervene in the process when they want to, if they want to?
Generally, yes. There's a couple of ways that people work with Quilter. So first things first, you can pre-solve any parts of the design that you like. For example, if you have an intense RF section and some sensitive coplanar waveguides and you want to control those, no problem. Like put those on your board and we'll leave them alone and do the rest. Quilter will run and give you some solution. And in general, after you download that board, we actually encourage you to go through some iterations, right? So you can kind of go through and adjust the placement and resubmit, adjust some of the routing and resubmit. And that's kind of how a designer typically collaborates with Quilter. It's just kind of sending the board back and forth.
Okay. Okay, well, it looks like we covered our audience questions. So I want to thank you again, Sergey and Darren, for a great Q&A. Before we wrap up, I'd like to announce our prize winner for this session. So congratulations to Walter Coxon and Jason S. We'll be in touch with you in the next week to ensure we have the information so we can send you a giveaway package. In a moment, you're going to be redirected to Quilter's microsite. I encourage you to check out today's other live sessions, keynotes, and published content. And thank you for attending today's All About Circuit Summit series. And thank you, presenters, and thank you, audience.